Barry, I think we are learning. I think we can get better at it. We've been very, very clear as a leadership team that winning the hearts and minds of our employees is critical. It's actually one of our, strategic objectives, and we can only do that if people feel like they truly belong, and they can only feel like they truly belong if they feel that we're supporting them.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Rise to Leadership podcast, a show that explores topics that matter while sharing stories of inspiring leaders who are creating positive changes. I'm so excited to lead this conversation today with Marisa Daly. In this live conversation, Marisa, who is a cancer survivor, will share her own story of resilience and survival and how to deal with or support employees or your friends who may be experiencing or have experienced traumatic situations. Marisa Daly is a HR director at the American Tower Corporation, where she is leading HR and providing human resources management oversight in 20 countries in West, Central, South, and East Africa. She has learned that life does indeed go on when you are afraid and uncertain. It is probably best to just keep going until things become clearer. You can agree with me that with everything going on in our world today, building a mindset of resilience is more important than ever. The COVID-19 pandemic has in many ways caused a heightened level of loss and trauma, and people are dealing with these issues in different ways. If there's one thing I want you to get out of this session today, it is that if you're dealing with any traumatic situation at this time, you're not alone. As a leader, I want you to start prioritizing building an inclusive organization, fostering human connections, and employees' well-being. And of course, if you want to connect with other leaders in a safe space, I invite you to join one of our Connect to Grow sessions. Visit www.riseandleadwomen.com/events for more details. So now I'm going to bring Marisa. Welcome, Marisa. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. Marisa, I met you at the Rise and Lead Women African event organized by Adebola and her team, and you opened up and shared how you survived cancer and the trauma associated with it. My first question is, please tell me, when you heard about the news that you had cancer, how did that make you feel?
I think my first thought was, I'm going to die. My second thought was, I'm not going to see my children grow up. But very quickly after that, I thought, I better have a plan because I want to survive. So what was interesting was how we are geared as humans to survive, and how I went from catastrophizing to strategizing about what is my plan to ensure long-term survival for myself.
So the first feeling was that fear, or
Fear,
were you thinking about what's going to happen next? How do I survive? Strategizing on how to survive. Not so many people survive from cancer. So congratulations. I'm happy that you survived it. I wanted to ask, I don't want to go so deep into this, but I read in your bio where you said, I have learned that life does indeed go on. And when you are afraid and uncertain, it is probably best to just keep going until things become clearer. What does that mean? Tell me more.
So I think my journey is not unique, and there's so many people who've had to deal with loss and grief and cancer situations and other issues that are very, very traumatic. And what you feel when you are going through loss and grief is you feel so alone. There is so much space between you and the world, and you just don't know how you're going to carry on. And I think the turning point for me was when I was actually lying on the operating table, and I all of a sudden just thought, I'm not ready to die. And this moment is actually all I have. I only have this moment. I don't know anything else. I can only rely on this moment. So I need to put all my energy into this moment. And after that, it was a bit of a turning point where I was just thinking, all right, one step at a time, just get through the surgery, get through the first month, get through 3 months, get through 6 months. And here I am a year later. And it was really with that commitment to, I only know this moment, because there's so much uncertainty when you're dealing with this kind of trauma, and so many conflicting opinions and ideas, that you really can think only of this moment, take the next step, figure out the next moment.
Wow, I can't even imagine what you experienced, but I'm very sure so many people at this during this pandemic, so many people have lost loved ones. I have lost my brother is going to be laid to rest in 2 days, and so this is also bringing a lot of emotions for me. But let's bring this to organizational level. I believe that to build an inclusive organization, leaders need to start creating safe environments where everyone can share their hurts and losses and can feel supported through any form of crisis, rather than being left alone with a deep feeling of isolation. Very often, our workplaces are not equipped to support people who are experiencing trauma or loss, and this can feel deeply isolating. Some leaders feel, it's your family problems, it's your personal issues, keep it away from the office, they don't mix. How has your experience shaped you, and how are you using your position as a human resources executive to support others and also to build a more supportive environment in your workplace?
Thanks, Sabiri. That's a really good question. I mean, I would say that, again, I would say my experience is not unique. I'm not the only person who's ever dealt with grief or with loss. My superpower, I think, that we should all develop to deal with this terrible trauma that we're all facing and the loss that we're all facing, is kindness. It's the simple act of kindness, of reaching out to another human being who might be going on a very, very lonely journey. And the challenge is that when you are going through this kind of trauma, you do feel very isolated. And kindness helps to bridge the gap between isolation and engagement or participation for that person. It gives them a stepping stone to help them. So I would say, for, in the future workplace, I know it's not on the list of competencies on a normal job description, but I think we really, really need to practice more kindness in the workplace, everyone. And it is something that is so part of who we are as humans. To connect is part of who we are as humans. And just to be empathetic and say, I can't imagine what you're going through because I haven't been through it. Everyone's experience of loss and grief is different. How can I help? I'm here. How can I help? That's all. Often that's all somebody who's gone through a loss wants to hear.
Wow, that's so powerful. How can I help? Just asking, how can I help? And talking about kindness in leadership. I know that leading people through times of trauma requires some level of emotional intelligence. What would you say is the best way to connect with people going through difficult situations?
I really think that just the simple act of reaching out sort of removes the barrier. And what I found, because I have a position of influence and I have a position where I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to reach out to many people in our markets, I found that if I simply just share my story, in an open and authentic way, and I ask people how they're doing, then that gives them the space to share what they're going through in a very non-judgmental way. And in that way, then we're able to make those connections So it's actually for me that virtual hand holding. If I think of when I was on that operating table and I burst into tears, I had been fine the whole time, and then I burst into tears, and one of the doctors came and she just held my hand. And so I think that this virtual holding of each other's hands is such a powerful and simple way for us to reach through the divide and to make those authentic connections.
That's an interesting answer. And holding people's hands, supporting people, finding out how they are feeling, they are all very important. They go a long way in helping people feel seen, safe, and supported, and less isolated. Thanks for sharing that. But as women and leaders, it's easy for us to fall into the trap of giving too much of ourselves in order to help others improve. To what extent should leaders get involved?
Well, I would say that we actually don't have a choice. I think that as a leader, we need to be fully engaged, because what COVID has shown us is that the personal and the professional spaces are now completely merged, and you can't compartmentalize. And somebody who's dealing with grief or trauma and who isn't able to deal with that in a supportive way, that's going to start showing up in the workplace. So ultimately, you're going to have to deal with it anyway. And what I always say to people is, even if you don't know what to say, just reach out. Just say, how can I help? That's all we need to do. And even if you don't have the skills to help, figure it out with the person. But I think that it's very important for us to show compassion as leaders. I think it's another superpower that leaders should have going forward. And I also think that it's true what you say, that as women, we can sometimes become like the office empaths, the people that everyone comes to share, and especially in my role. So you have to be very clear about looking after yourself first. Another big lesson for me in this whole cancer journey was that my body left a very big post-it, a very big calling card on me with cancer, in terms of put yourself first before you're able to give yourself wholly to others. And that's been a journey for me. But I also believe that that's also part of my story. It's to say that to people, to bring my most authentic self, that it's not all pretty and sweet and light, and that at any given time in life, we're able to learn valuable lessons.
Marisa, thank you for sharing your personal story here. Adebola is writing that, Marisa, you're such an inspiration. And she's congratulating you again. Adebola, thanks for joining us. So now let's move to about women leadership. Rise and Lead Women, we are on a mission to increase the representation of women in top leadership positions. And of course, we're in Europe and in Africa. And, I wanted to ask you, because you and I know that women are underrepresented in every sector of the economy. My question to you is, what have you noticed that stops the advancement and retention of women in workplaces? How can we identify and, if necessary, remedy these situations?
Well, I think the first thing is that it starts with us. So often I come across women in the workplace that they're almost apologetic about the space that they own. And I would say, just own your space in your most authentic way and make peace with that, because I think there's some mixed messages that we sometimes have, even for ourselves, on what we see, is the right way to be a woman in the workplace. So I think, first of all, own your space unapologetically. The second thing is that I don't believe that we have enough supporters generally in organizations of women. And I'm not only talking about other women, which I think is very important, but we need to rally support around us from men and women in the workplace. And we can only do that by highlighting and taking opportunities when they come to highlight issues, because with no disrespect to men at all, they won't see things in the same way because they're not going through it like we are. But, people, women in positions of influence, and I would say that you don't have to be in a leadership position to influence. You can be in any place in the organization and have influence. You need to use that opportunity in whatever way you can. And then I absolutely think that we need more mentors for women. I'm passionate about that. And it's not only other women mentoring women, we need some champions as well within the male contingent.
Yeah, before we talk about mentorship, your first point, I want to bring you back to the first thing you said about own your space unapologetically. It's a tall order. Everybody likes to say own your space. What do you mean by that?
I think it's really important, and this is not an overnight thing. I think it's a journey for everyone, but it's really important to spend time to figure out who you are, who you are, what you want, what are your boundaries, what are your trigger points. So, do a lot of self-reflection, because often I think that if we're defensive or apologetic, it's often maybe something that's being triggered in us that we maybe haven't resolved or worked through in our own makeup or in our own way of being. So I would encourage everyone to really spend time getting to know you so that you really like you, and can show up to say, you're really lucky to know me because I'm great. So I like me. You should also like me.
I always say show up with your value, show up with your gifts, because I believe that
Exactly.
everybody has something unique that they can bring to the table. So, yes, showing up, taking up spaces, and I agree with you. But it starts with understanding who you are. Thanks for sharing that. And, you talked a bit about support, you talked a bit about mentorship. What you're saying is that as women, we need support from both men and women. And I saw something you wrote somewhere. You said, I had considerable help. I want to read it. You say, I had considerable help and support from my first and best mentor, an amazing woman who believed in me and showed me the way. Tell me more about that.
So the amazing woman is a lady by the name of Margaret Montague. It was in my first kind of big job in human resources. And I had to put my hand up. She needed someone to help with recruitment in Africa. And I said, I can help you. I can do it. And from there, one thing led to another. So she saw in me something and she believed in me. But what I will never forget about her is one day she had asked me to do a presentation in front of a number of senior people on recruitment. I can't remember what it was. And I said, no, Margaret, I'm not a presenter. I'm a backroom person. I don't present. I don't talk in public. And she looked at me and she said, Marisa, if you don't learn how to stand up in front of people and present with confidence, your career is going nowhere. And that was like, okay. And then I went on to present, and it was fine. I learned some stuff, and now I'm quite confident and comfortable in presenting. But she was so instrumental, even with that simple piece of advice, because perhaps she saw that I wasn't a backroom person and she believed in me when I didn't.
Wow. I mean, what I'm picking up from what you're saying is that, and I like it because sometimes people misunderstand what mentorship is all about. So many people I've heard talk a lot about formal mentorship relationships where I call somebody once in a while. But this lady looked at you and she saw something in you that you did not see yourself, and she decided to support you. And she saw your fears, but she knows that there's something bigger beyond your fears. And she stood by your side and, prompted you and pushed you to go ahead. This reminds me of a conversation I had today with some female executives in one company, the meeting we had this morning. And we were talking about supporting women. It's not, it's about believing in people, trusting people, and tell them you can do it. You have more in you than you know. You have more in you than you
Absolutely.
know. Just do it. And you did it, right? You
I
didn't
did
die
it.
when you stood there.
I did it. And it was actually, it was such a practical piece of advice, and that I was able to immediately implement. So often I think when we think about mentorship, we think about some very fancy scheme, but sometimes it's just like having a conversation with someone and helping them figure out what the next step is.
Sorry, for those who are listening or watching and they are wondering, how do I even approach these mentors? How do I get these people to support me? Because very often I heard women keep saying women don't support women. I mean, people sing it like a big song, and now you are telling me that a woman supported you. I have been supported by a lot of women. What will you tell our audience who are watching or listening on how to go about finding support to help them advance their careers?
That's a good question. I mean, I think often people shy away from mentoring others because they think that there's like some magic way of doing it, and there's pressure then on the mentor to show up in the right way. But for me, mentorship is fairly straightforward. And if you understand that and explain it to the mentor of what you want to get out of them, what you'd like to achieve, then that takes some of the pressure off the mentor as well. So for me, mentorship is about tell me your story and share with me what you've learned that I can perhaps learn from you, good or bad, and I really admire your journey and want to hear from you what you've got to say. Listen to my challenges and don't judge, and just listen to me and give me a space that I can just talk, and sometimes just talk through stuff that I need to process. The other one is help me to connect in the organization, help me to understand what the political waters are like and how to navigate them. So if you go, it could be a whole lot of other stuff. For me, it's usually those three things. So if you approach someone who you admire and that you would like to mentor you, and you say to them, this is the stuff that I would really like to get out of this relationship, then it makes the outcome and the objectives of the relationship very, very clear. And it takes the sort of mystery out of mentorship and gives that mentor very clear direction of at least how to start the relationship with you.
When you're talking, I'm listening to, I'm hearing like, I've interviewed so many women leaders, and they all have different perspectives when it comes to mentorship. And I like your perspectives about being clear about what you want to get out of the relationships and being upfront in having this conversation, very open conversation on what you want to get out of the relationships. And sometimes it's very important that we also don't think about it as a relationship, but as somebody who I can reach out to when I need the
A
person, when I need
resource.
help, and ask the person some questions, okay? And also find ways I can add value to other people, and especially somebody that you want to help you. Maybe sometimes, how can I also add value to the person? So thanks for
Absolutely.
sharing. Thanks for sharing. Let's talk about self-care, which is one of my favorite topics at this time. Many leaders have struggled during the lockdown with managing family responsibilities and work demands. How have you successfully done this?
So paradoxically, I've actually taken up hobbies, so I've actually added to my plate intentionally, taken up a few hobbies that are not related to work or to the family necessarily, and given me something to focus on, and almost forced me to disconnect because I want to focus on something else. So I've done 2 creative writing courses. I've taken up tennis, which I think I'd mentioned before, and I'm still very bad at it. And I'm learning to sew. So paradoxically, I've actually added a few more things to my plate because it's forced me to prioritize myself. And it's forced me to say, this is my clear commitment. The family knows, and then obviously I make sure that then I'm not working all hours of the day and night, but actually committing to something else.
That's interesting. This last weekend, the Easter holiday, I was not doing anything. I didn't open my laptop from Friday. I was just watching Netflix from morning until night, like for 12 good hours. And at one point, my son came to my room. I said, Mommy, are you okay? Are you okay? Because he had never seen me outside of my laptop.
Do nothing.
So I think it's necessary that sometimes we need to unplug and relax. But I want to ask you a tough question as a human resources director. I know so many women are struggling during this period, especially when the children are at home. They are struggling to manage their children, their families. They have work demands. How are you in your organization, and especially as a woman, how are you ensuring that these women feel supported?
Good question. Barry, I think we are learning. I think we can get better at it. We've been very, very clear as a leadership team that winning the hearts and minds of our employees is critical. It's actually one of our, strategic objectives. And we can only do that if people feel like they truly belong. And they can only feel like they truly belong if they feel that we're supporting them. So, just simple practical things like we're trying not to schedule meetings before 9 o'clock in the morning. We're trying not to schedule meetings after 6 o'clock at night. We're trying to be respectful to people's lunch breaks. Most line managers, in fact, all line managers that I'm in contact with are very understanding of, women having to take children to school or not even homeschool or whatever it needs to happen in that space. But I do think that, we're not perfect at it simply because we're learning as we go along. But again, winning the hearts and minds of employees can only be achieved if people really feel like there's empathy and that they feel like they belong. So we really have a commitment to that.
That's excellent, excellent work you're doing. Not everyone is doing this, so well done. And I wanted to share with our audience, those who are watching, if you have any question for Marisa, go ahead and type in the chat box. But before I ask my final question, Marisa, you said that your work has enabled you to engage with people and cultures from across the globe and all continents, except for Antarctica. In Africa, you have traveled extensively from north to south and everything in between. And you said you really cannot say which is your favorite place. How can you say that? I'm very sure you've been to Nigeria, and I'm sure it should be your favorite place. I'm very sure of that.
Oh, I do love the energy in Lagos. I love Nigeria. But actually, after I mentioned that to you, I thought about, oh, do I have a favorite place apart from Lagos? Because I need to say that for all my Nigerian friends. There's, Pont Noir in Congo, Brazzaville is highly underrated. It is such a beautiful gem of a town. The food is beautiful. It's got this very quaint, almost village feel to it. The people are amazing. There's a fascinating expat community there. It's, it's just an incredible place to go. And yet people would probably think, oh, Pont Noir, and maybe judge it in some way because for whatever reason. But it's an incredible place.
I feel so ashamed that as an African, you're telling me about an African country. I have never been to any African country apart from my country. I feel so ashamed to hear that. So I will try and visit. I'm going to put it on my bucket list to at least maybe visit 5 countries in Africa. And thank you for sharing about the generosity and openness that you've experienced in Africa. I know all of that. But final question is, I always like to end by asking, what 3 things would you say contributed to your leadership growth?
Ambition. And I feel it's okay to be honest about being ambitious. I don't, it's part of that, don't be apologetic, just be authentic. Ambition, I think hard work. And lastly, someone along the way, or many people, not only one, took a bet on me at the right time.
Wow, ambitious. Three things. You ambitious
Yeah.
from your own end, right?
Yeah, I had a plan. I wanted to achieve stuff. I still do,
Hmm.
even post cancer, when you sometimes in your darkest days wonder if anyone will ever see you whole, ever again. I still am ambitious. I still have things that I want to achieve with my life.
It's good to be ambitious. I love ambitious people. When you're ambitious, you're able to ask for what you want, boldly, unapologetically, the way you put it. And so I want to say thank you so much for joining me today,
Thank you.
Marisa, sharing your knowledge and wisdom with our audience. And I want to say thank you to everybody who joined us live. This conversation will be, on your favorite podcast channel, Spotify or Apple. And thank you. And
Thank you.
yes, and bye. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Uh,
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to share.